So Mrs. Brooks and I will be demoing sort of how the process works and what it looks like, and trying to make this interactive with you guys as we go through it. So just be patient with yourself as you're trying things out and exploring, and think of this as an opportunity to get started, and you'll have lots of time outside of our presentation and our session to perfect this. But the goal for today is to help guide you guys on how to develop and create the most competitive college application. So I will turn it over to Mrs. Brooks.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We are excited to share with you and information to help you submit the most competitive college application.
Shoot, hold on, I'm trying to mute here. Sorry.
Okay. One moment. Okay, so as this slide now that I'm going to talk about talks about the types of college applications. So basically, there are two types of college applications. We refer to one type as university-specific applications, as well as there are common applications. So the difference between the two types are the university-specific applications are applications that can only be used for one specific college. So an example of a application-specific college would be like Grand Valley State University here in Michigan. That is the only way that you can apply to Grand Valley, is by applying directly through their college application specific for their school. Some schools offer a choice to use either a school-specific application or the common application. An example of a school that could take either of those would be Western Michigan University, for example. They have a college-specific option for you to apply directly to their university, or you can apply using the Common App, which is, again, a general application that can be used for multiple colleges. There are up to 900 colleges that accept the Common Application. Also, you can complete the application one time and then select the schools to which you want to apply. So that's one advantage of the Common Application. The school-specific applications tend to have fewer sections than the Common App. So the Common Application is a little bit more involved. There's a little bit more details that are required. There's more sections that are often used on the Common Application. And also, if you look at specific information on each school that you're applying to, there may be additional information that you have to include, even if you're using the Common App. So for example, some schools have additional essays that you may have to include in order to make their application complete, even if they are listed on the Common App. There's also a Black Common Application, which allows you to apply for up to 54 historically Black colleges and universities at one time using one Common Application. And that has one general fee that you would pay, which is actually $20. That would include your application to all 54 of those historically Black colleges that are included on that application.
Okay, so in terms of using the application, what we would like you to try to do now, and we'll give about a 2 to 3 minute pause, is go ahead and go to commonapp.org. You might have already created a Common App account because it did open on August 1st, but you might not have. So at this point, when you go to commonapp.org, you will create an account. As you guys are doing that, I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about some options here. You can use your Bloomfield email or your personal email. I would advise, if you're using a personal email, that you use one that is appropriate, you know, first and last name and a number, or initials or something like that. You wouldn't want to use something that wouldn't be a positive representation of yourself. It's easy to forget a password because it does require uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, and you can save it obviously on your computer, but maybe you're working somewhere else, or you had to get on your phone or some other device and you can't remember your password. It would be a good idea to save it in your phone. Keep in mind that the application will save the information as you're putting it in. So while you're working on this today, don't feel worried that you got to power through the whole thing to get it done today. You will have the opportunity to go in and out of the application and take your time to work on it. So even if you're applying to schools, for example, like Mrs. Brooks had mentioned, GVSU, and maybe you're applying to schools that don't use the Common App, that is okay, because the information that you would be inputting into the Common App would be the same type of information you would be putting into any other application. So if you don't want to start a Common App account, which it's okay if you do, even if you're not going to be using it, you could go onto a website of another college and start creating an account there if you want to, because the information will jive. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to create that account and start to play around with that so that we can help you guys work through it as we talk. So I will pass this back over to Mrs. Brooks. Yes.
Okay, hopefully, as Mrs. Klein stated, you've had an opportunity to create a Common App, account, if that is the method in which you're going to be applying to your colleges. So we're going to take a moment now and just look at some of the components of the Common App. So Mrs. Klein is going to pull that up. Is that?
Am I not sharing? Oh, sorry. Am I not sharing?
I don't see it on my screen,
Okay,
but
hang on.
okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what everyone hopefully can see now is the actual Common App website. And we're going to just look over some of the different components of the Common App to kind of guide you through how you'll be entering information to complete this. So the first section there is called the dashboard. And so the dashboard shows the list of colleges that you have inputted onto your Common App. So from the example that you see here, we have a few colleges that have been entered here. And each of those schools that are listed there kind of shows you, it will show you as you start to work on it, what your progress is for that particular college application. So if you look at IU Bloomington, for example, it shows there that you started to work on the application. So that says in progress. The writing supplement that is required for IU, it shows that that's in progress. So again, that's not showing completed, but it is showing that work has started on that particular section of the application. So again, the dashboard not only lists the colleges that you have entered, it also gives you an update on the progress that you've done as far as completing that application. The next section there is My Colleges. So again, this is where you would see a list of the colleges and any specific requirements that are required for that school you can also find. So if you click on IU, for example, there is a page that comes up that gives you information about the email for their admissions department is listed there. The deadlines for applying are listed there. If they have any additional college-specific questions that you have to complete, they give you information about that. If there's a supplemental writing requirement for that college, that'll be listed there as well. So again, the My Colleges tab gives you specific questions or requirements for that college that you're applying to. The next tab is called the Common App, and that is where you are entering your actual application sections for the Common App. So there's a profile where you're giving, demographic information about yourself. There is a family section, education, testing, activities, the writing, the required writing essay that is on the Common App will be listed there. And then you also have a section where you can input your courses and your grades. So that is information that you'll find under the actual Common App tab. The next section there is college search. So if you are wanting to add additional colleges, for example, to your college list, you can search here by either the college name or the city in which the college is listed. And then you are able to look at the application requirements for that school, or if you click the plus there, you're able to add that college actually to your list. Okay, the next section is entitled Financial Aid Resources. So again, this provides you with information about how to pay for college. So there's a lot of financial aid resources that are listed here, information about the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and other resources to help you find ways in order for you to pay for your college education. So for today's purposes, our presentation is really going to focus on those two yellow highlighted sections there. We're going to talk more about the My Colleges section, as well as the actual Common App. Okay, Mrs. Klein.
Okay, I just realized too that I was not presenting before. So, Miss, you want to close your audio? So a couple of these slides you did not see, but the link to the presentation will be available, so you can go back to some of that information so you can see it. So what we're going to focus on today, like Mrs. Brooks said, was the Common App tab and the Colleges tab. So to start, back on the app here, the first section here, as you can see, is profile. And this is some very simple, generic information. This would not take you very long to fill out. It asks you just information about your name, your address, demographics, what language you speak. It asks you about fee waivers. There are options to waive the fee to apply to colleges that have a fee if you qualify for that, and you could talk to your counselor about that if you do have questions. So the profile section would be something that you could complete pretty quickly. So we'll go to the next slide and hand it back over to Mrs.
Okay, so the next section on the Common App is the family section. So this is a place where you're going to input just general information about your parents and if you have any siblings. So they would like to know information about, your parents and whether or not they live in your household, if they don't live in your household, whatever the marital status is of your parents. Those are some of the questions that are asked in this section. Also, they want to know the size of your household, whether or not you have siblings, what their ages are, and how many people actually live within your home. So that is what the family section is asking.
So you will see in the next section, it asks a little bit about your education. So this takes a little bit more time. The first two sections were pretty simple. And as you move on, they start to require a little bit more attention. So in the application section, one of the first things that you're going to do is you're going to put in your current or most recent high school. So all of you should be entering Bloomfield Hills High School. You can search it two different ways, as you'll see. You can search simply by typing our school in, or you can enter this 232447. This is our CEEB code. You would pick from a drop-down menu in there what your method of searching is, whether it's by name or by code. So this is a pretty quick way to do it, but you could start typing in the name. It's pretty important that you make sure you have the correct high school because this impacts some of the following elements of the application. Your date of entry, oops, that should be 17. So I'm going to edit that. And you started in September of 17. Mm-hmm. Oh, it must be earlier than your graduation. So we'll have to change this to June of 2021. Mm-hmm. And then it asks you some more questions about this. So it's going to ask you about colleges and universities. So if you attended any other courses that you took dual enrollment, for example, at OCC, it's going to ask you about that. It asks you about your GPA and your graduating class size. It is on the slide. Our graduating class size is approximately 440. This does not have to be an exact number. You can see it's approximate, but we will also provide you with this information when we come back and have our senior meeting in the fall, because that number could fluctuate a little bit. Class ranking, it's important that you put none. Bloomfield Hills High School does not rank students. There's no ranking system, so you would put none. The GPA scale would be a 4.0 scale, and you would want to enter your unweighted GPA here in the cumulative based on the 4-point scale. It asks you about your current and most recent courses. This is pretty important, and as I think Mr. Fogel and Mrs. Mattis had mentioned, that you don't want to submit an application before school starts, because as you guys all know probably, as you're entering your 4th year here, that sometimes the schedule that you had requested in the spring doesn't always pan out in the fall because a class is full or a class might not run or various other scheduling scenarios. So what you can do is you can start to put in some of the classes that you know you registered for. All of our classes are semester. You'll enter how many courses, and you'd see, even though you take 8 a year, or 8 a semester, I put 10 here. And the reason why is because you might have a couple classes that are only 1 semester. So you have, 5 or 6 full year classes, and then maybe you're taking weight training and ceramics. So those are entered separately as semester courses. And that's why my number here would be more than 8. You enter your course title, it asks you the level, how long the year is, so on and so forth. So you can start to put these courses in and change them, or you could maybe wait on some of the electives that you're a little bit more unsure about. So that's what you want to do for the current or most recent courses. There is a section that asks you a little bit about honors. I'm going to go back here for a moment where we have some information about honors. It only allows up to 5 entries. So keep that in mind. You can only include up to 5. This is something specific, an award that recognizes an academic achievement. It does mention that in the title of the section, that it's looking for academics. So here are a couple examples of some academic types of honors or awards. That's obviously not an exhaustive list. You could have things that are not listed there. We get a lot of questions about National Honor Society. National Honor Society is a club. It does have an academic requirement in order to apply and be admitted to that club. So it's really not technically an honor in and of itself, but that's something, if you have more questions about, you can of course see your counselor. It also asks about this community-based organizations here, right under the honors section, and it asks you the number of community-based organizations that might have provided you with some help. So these are organizations that give free assistance with specifically completing a college application. So again, if you have a question about whether that applies to you, you can ask your counselor, but that's specific to helping you with your college apps. Future plans. There is a section asking here about what your future plans are. And sometimes students get a little bit apprehensive about filling this out. You'll see here that having a career interest is required because it has the little red asterisk. So it gives you a whole bunch of general career options. You might be in a position where you don't know, or you're sort of wavering between 2 or 3 or even 4 different career interests. That's okay. A college is not holding you to this. So don't feel like I can't put something because maybe I put business and then I get to college and I change my mind and I'm interested in law, for example. So that's okay. No one's going back to your application to say, this student applied with an interest in business and now they're saying something else. They're not doing that. So do not feel concerned about whether you are stuck with this type of a commitment. So just go with your gut, and that's okay if that would change. So that is the education section. We're going to shift to Mrs. Brooks, and she will talk a little bit about the testing section.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So testing. So students, you can even now start to send your test scores to colleges that you are knowing that you're going to apply to. It does not matter if the test scores arrive prior to other pieces of your application. So you would need to order, though, those official test scores directly from the testing agency's website. So whether that be the College Board, if you're sending SAT scores, or whether it be the ACT website if you are sending an ACT score to a college. But again, it is the student's responsibility to send official test scores directly to the colleges that you're applying to. Bloomfield Hills High School does not send test scores at all to colleges. On the Common App, you can self-report your test scores. So in other words, if you would like, you can send multiple, or your highest rather, individual composite test score is what is recommended if you're going to self-report your test scores. And you can do that even if they are from different test dates. So you can send your highest composite from each section of the ACT, for example, even if it is from different test dates. After you select the test, you will report, you can then enter your test results. So you have to select the test date that you want to submit from, and then you're able to input your test results. And then you also want to make sure that you're checking each of your colleges' information page for specific information about their testing policy. You know, especially now, we know in this COVID situation that we're living with now, you know, colleges, some of them have made some changes to their testing requirements. So you also want to make sure that you're looking at each individual college's website for any up-to-date information about their testing policy before you make your decision about what test scores you want to send, which test scores you want to self-report, and even whether or not, as been mentioned earlier, you want to even consider doing test optional for a school. You also can choose what schools you want to send your self-reported test scores to. So there is an option that you don't necessarily have to send the self-reported test scores to every college, but you can choose if there are certain schools specifically that you would like your self-reported test scores to go to. But if you are deciding to apply test optional, then you want to make sure that you select no. If we can look at that question 1, for example, on the testing. Let's see. Is that the one? Okay, you want to make sure that you're selecting no in question 1, because that means then you will not be sending your self-reported test scores to colleges if you're choosing test optional. So again, where it says, in addition to sending official test scores, if you're going to send self-reported, you would say no if you are going to send, or not send rather, your test scores, and if you're choosing to apply test optional to a school. Okay, all right, that's it on testing.
One other item to add just quickly about testing is you'll see that I put in here AP subject tests or IB subject tests. Those are not required. However, you can include them if you choose to. Typically, a rule of thumb for whether or not you should enter an AP test would be if you scored a 4 or 5. But if you have tests that you don't want to report or you didn't take any, you just wouldn't add it. And I just took it off and you easily can remove it. Same thing with IB tests, since especially most of those classes are 2 years, you probably won't have a test to report. So that's an option. And again, if you have specific questions about it, you know, you can, of course, talk to your counselor. So section 5 is the activities section. If you are thinking about the application as a whole, aside from the writing section, this is probably the section that takes the most time. You can enter up to 10 activities. It does not allow more than that. No one should have more than 10 anyway, to be honest. If you have more than 10, it starts to look like how valuable or how much time was a student really able to commit to some of those activities. So it's not meant to be a laundry list. When you are entering your activities, they should be entered in order of importance or relevance to you. So it's not based on when you did that, but based on how important and relevant it is. Keep in mind when you're thinking about activities, sometimes students think, okay, well, it has to be something in school. It does not. Aside from choir, you know, being on an athletic team, doing a school club, your activities are much greater than that. Any community service experiences that were something that you committed a significant amount of time to, that would be included there. If you have a job, you could include your job, any youth groups, if you were in a local community theater, anything like that and more. That's not a comprehensive list. Those are just some examples to think about. But your activities are oftentimes span far beyond just the four walls of our high school. Keeping in mind the explanation, and I'll show you the app in the section in a minute, it is limited to 150 characters, and that's not words, it's characters. So it's very, very limited. So you have to carefully wordsmith what you're putting in there and carefully highlighting what's most important about your involvement in the activity. If you were, you know, involved in some leadership element, you were the chairperson of, you know, service, or you were recruiting or something like that, or responsibility of being a mentor for younger members, those would be things you would want to make sure that you are including in that very limited section where you can explain it. So you can see here, do you have any activities to report? And I said, yes, I do. So you'll see that at first you have some drop downs of what you can pick, what type of area. So there's a lot of things here in terms of a category. Just for example, I'm going to pick athletics. You'll see all sorts of different teams here. You would select what that sport or athletic team is here. You'll see position or leadership, and you have some 50 characters here to explain that you were captain of the swim team, or you you know, had some other leadership position of trying to mentor, like I said, younger students. The organization name, so your organization is Bloomfield Hills High School if you're on the school swim team. But for example, with the theater option I mentioned, you could say you were part of the Bloomfield Hills Community Theater or something like that. And this is where it asks you to describe it, including what you accomplished. So I mentioned leadership before, but really you could put that here. But this is where you could sort of add a little bit more explanation and detail of what you did. It mentions a recognition you received. For example, maybe you had most improved player, or maybe you received some other award or recognition that you would want to include there. So that's where you explain it. You would put your grade levels, which is nice because that means you don't have to explain here and take up too many spaces or too many characters by saying 4-year member, because you're just going to click the grade level. The timing is when it took place. And this is sometimes one that students get a little, you know, concerned about, hours spent per week. This is really an average. And, you know, I understand that with some service experiences, one week you might have spent 2 hours and another week you might have spent 12 hours, depending on what's going on. Just kind of ballpark it. If you're not putting something that's completely seems impossible, no one's going to be questioning what you're putting here. Be reasonable and think about this as an average. It asks you if you intend to participate in the activity. Don't feel like you should be putting yes for all of them. That would be unrealistic. So think about the ones that you truly are interested in. If you're not playing college sports, you should not be putting yes here. Be thinking about what you truly are interested in and what you truly want to do when you're in college, and it should not be yes for everything. So be realistic with that. So the activity section is important, and make sure, like I said, it's relevance. If I swam for only 2 years, maybe that's not the first thing that I would put. But if I was a 4-year participant on the Youth Action Board, for example, and then I spent, you know, hours every week committed to working on that, and then I became the recruitment coordinator, that could be something that you would put in one of those first 1, 2, 3 positions. So being thoughtful about that is important. If you did an activity, a service activity, one time I volunteered in 10th grade for 2 hours at Gleaners Food Bank, and that's it, think about whether or not that's something really relevant to include. It wasn't something that you committed to. It wasn't something that incorporated a lot of involvement. So that point about laundry list, ask yourself, is this something that's really relevant that reflects positively on me and my application? Let me just make sure I covered everything here on this slide. Okay, so going to the writing section and passing us back off to
Okay. Okay, writing. So I know Mrs. Griesbeck already did a very great job with going over details and suggestions about how to attack the writing section. But again, this is a part of the Common App. There are 7 essay prompts from which you can choose. Actually, this year, the Common App did not alter from the writing prompts that were given from last year. So it's noted here on the Common App that they're actually using the 2019-20 writing prompts. So there are 7 of them here again that you are able to choose from. And just some tips to keep in mind when you're choosing one of those 7, that no matter which one that you choose, you want to tell it in your own voice. You want to make sure that you're telling your own story. You know, I know Mrs. Griesbeck gave you some examples of, you know, how important it is to have someone else to look over, you know, what you're writing, but you don't want that to be their voice that's coming out in that writing. You want to make sure that you're telling your own story, that you're being authentic, that you're being yourself, and that, you know, you're speaking from the heart and not, you know, sometimes it's easy to get caught up in what we think the colleges want to hear, but they really want to hear your voice. They really want to hear your story, because no one else can have the same story. You know, be honest in what you're sharing when you're writing whatever of the prompts rather that you choose to write on. Make sure that you're being honest. And then also, you know, just make sure you're incorporating all of those tips that Mrs. Griesbeck, you know, spent time going over in that writing section. You also obviously can, you know, check in with your English teachers for extra support. Your counselors also can help with advice on how to go about writing some of the information or how to address the essay topics that you're choosing from. And then remember as well, when you check on the individual college's website, they may also have some additional essays that they want you to provide as well. So as you see here, Mrs. Klein has clicked on the, is this a particular school in general?
No, this is just the regular.
Okay, so this is just the regular writing, and it shows you here out of that list of colleges that you have listed, which one of them actually are requiring that. So that you see on the left-hand side here, out of those colleges that you have on your list from the dashboard, it shows you whether or not they require the personal essay. So there's several colleges from the list of colleges that we entered in our example that do require it. And then on the right-hand side here, these are a list of colleges that actually are not requiring that personal essay as a part of the common application. And then again, as I stated too, if you look on each of the colleges' individual, you know, websites, then you'll see whether or not there's any additional essays that that college may also require of you to make your application complete as well. Okay.
And one other thing to add to that is, even though it's not required for these schools, you still have the option to submit it for these schools if you choose to do so. It wouldn't necessarily be negative if you didn't, but most likely a lot of students have schools on their list that do require it anyway. So there's nothing wrong with sending the essay to even the schools who don't require it, because that's just something that can further build your application and tell your story. So that is still an option, even if you're applying to a school that does not require it.
Right. Let's see.
And then, you know, and to just piggyback off of that as well, whenever, you know, you see the word optional, I sometimes look at that as a requirement. You know, if you're really trying to build a very competitive, you know, application, and you want to try to set your application,
you know, different than the next applicant, you also want to consider that sometimes when they say optional, as Mrs. Klein has already stated, it would not hurt to go on and just do that particular essay or whatever that additional requirement might be, just so that that college shows how serious, or you're showing that college rather, how serious you are about being admitted to them. That even though they may have labeled something as optional, you're going to take that as, this is something that I need to do, because they wouldn't ask for it if they weren't interested. Thank you.
Okay, so section 7 is called courses and grades. This is a section that was developed more recently, probably within the last 3 years or so, and most colleges do not require it. basically the courses and grades section is an exact transcription of the information in your high school transcript into the Common App. So you would legitimately be starting with 9th grade and you'd say Algebra 1, Semester 1 grade A, Semester 2 grade A, and you would be putting it in for every single class for all 3 years of high school. It doesn't ask for information beyond any class that would be on your transcript. So you'll see here when you click on it, I have a list of a lot of schools that I've entered, and I only have 2 that are requiring it. So that kind of shows you that it's really not required by a lot of schools. It is a little bit more labor intensive and takes a little bit more time to go through it. But it does ask you if you're able to obtain your transcript and whether or not it shows your grades, which all of you would say yes, because we would be sending your transcript anyway. But you would go ahead and start to fill this out by just clicking edit and starting to add the classes. So it does take a little bit more time. You got to just be patient with it. But most of you probably won't have very many, if any, that require it. So that's a newer feature that takes a little bit more time. Okay.
Slow and clicking this button. Okay, additional information. Okay, I'm sorry, additional information. So this section of the Common App should be used if there's something significant that you would like the college to know that you weren't able to share anywhere else in your application. So it's not a place for you just to, add a resume or to just, input something that you've already talked about in another part of your application. But for example, if you had a very, extenuating circumstance that may have occurred during the shutdown of schools, due to maybe the COVID-19 pandemic, rather. Maybe that's a story or some additional information that you think might be relevant to a college that you would like them to know about you. So that would be an example of some additional information that's not asked anywhere else within the application that you didn't address within any of the, essay options that you were given for the college, but that you would like for them to be able to know and to be able to consider when you are applying to their college. So that again is a place where you will put that type of information. It's not a place for you just to elaborate on something that you ran out of space for in another part of the application. You want it to be something that is not mentioned anywhere else and that you really think is worthy of that college knowing, and that is the place where you would add that information. And if you're not sure, that's a question that, again, you can ask directly of your, counselor. If you have a question about whether or not something that you think might be noteworthy that you want the college to be aware of, whether or not that's something that fits in that additional information section, if that would be most appropriate.
Okay, so moving back to the application tabs at the top, we're going to look now at the My Colleges tab. So you can see here I've added a lot of schools just to kind of show you some different things that different colleges might have. But please know that anything that is asked in that section for a school is specific to that school and only visible to that school. So unlike the Common App tab, where anything that goes in there and you click submit goes to every school on your list, when you click submit to a college that has sections that are specific to that school, only that school will see it. So it's going to ask you questions about a program in their school, or maybe a semester that you're applying for, or a specific major, or this is often where you will see this writing supplement. So this is where this essay is specific to Indiana University. And it even says here, these activities that you are eager to pursue as an undergraduate at Indiana University. These questions in these colleges tabs are your opportunity to then say why you want to attend a specific school. What is it about that school? be careful. You don't want to say something like, I've wanted to go here since I was a young kid because this is where my parents went. Or, you know, I love East Lansing, or I love Ann Arbor, or I've been wanting to sit in the stands at whichever school's football or basketball game. Please do not write that. That's not what a college wants to hear. They want to hear what you know about maybe their academic programs or their extracurricular programs or something else that attracts you to that school. So just think about that, and we caution you to be careful about how you answer those questions, because you're applying to these colleges most likely because they have something academic or extracurricular that's attractive to you. To just say because that's where someone in your family went isn't really what the colleges are looking for. So that's the writing supplement. These questions that you'll see here are, you know, as I mentioned, a start term, if you're going to use a fee waiver. So these are some more general questions, not necessarily writing, some of your goals. Here's where it asked, I want my ACT, SAT scores included in the review of my application. So if you were applying test optional, for example, you would say no, but it gives here also a link where you can learn more about their test optional policy specifically. So this is all here only going to that particular university, nowhere else. So that's your time to really focus on something in the school that is of interest to you.
Right.
One other thing. And Mrs. Brooks said this as well. Some schools will say optional next to a question or an essay. In our opinion, really, optional means do it. If they're offering you an opportunity to say something else about yourself or about your interest, you should be taking advantage of that. It shows that you have the initiative to spend the time working on information the school is requesting, as opposed to looking for a shortcut. That's not what they would want to see. So.
Okay, so the next section that we're going to talk about refers to recommenders and FERPA. So FERPA stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So we use Naviance as the tool in which we send letters of recommendation to colleges. So there's no need for you to add recommenders on the Common App. Again, because as a school we use Naviance, no recommenders will need to be entered onto the Common App. When you are completing the FERPA release authorization, basically what you're doing is you're granting our high school permission to send letters of recommendations and transcripts on your behalf. So the letters of recommendations from your teachers that you select, as well as the written evaluations that we write as counselors, are allowed to be sent by you signing the FERPA release. Once you have signed that release and have sent it, it is now complete and you can't change it. So you're not able to change how you choose to send to sign rather the FERPA release. You're not able, as you're going through the Common App, to even sign the release until you have at least completed the education section or the beginning of the education section on the Common App. So if we could look at the Common App there, and if you see under education, well, we're on the colleges page right now. So this is actually showing you where the recommendation and FERPA release is located. But that won't even pop up as an option for you to respond to until you have done the education section on the Common App. So if you've at least listed your high school there, that will allow you to be able to sign the FERPA waiver. And again, the FERPA waiver is located under, and once you sign the FERPA waiver, it applies to every college that you have listed there on your Common Application. So you don't have to do the FERPA for each individual college. Once you have signed that waiver, it applies to every college that you are applying to on the Common App. So again, you don't need to invite us through the Common App or your teachers through the Common App, because again, we're sending that information through Naviance. But once you get to this page here, the first thing you do is, again, to grant permission for us to release all the required documents. So these are the questions here that will come up, and you have to decide whether or not you're going to waive your ability to view the letters of recommendation that are sent on your behalf. So after you read through these statements here, if you select that box that says, I've read and understood the FERPA release authorization explanation, then you will continue. And then the next step will ask you here, it says that I acknowledge that every school that I have attended. So if you've only attended the one school, which is our high school, then you're acknowledging that you're giving our school permission to release all requested records and recommendations to colleges to which you are applying. So that would consist of your transcripts, as well as the letters of recommendations from your teachers, as well as the written evaluation that we would write as your counselor. So you have two options to select once you have done that. Either I waive my right to review all recommendations and supporting documents, or I do not waive my right to review all recommendations and supporting documents. Now, again, you have to keep in mind that as counselors, as well as teachers, we may only choose to write a letter if a student agrees to waive their right, because you want the college to know that the letters that are being written on your behalf are written truly as a representation of that person's evaluation of you. So you don't want to have them thinking that you're going to have access to read this, and that the letters may, be written in such a way where they're not given a true accurate presentation of who you are. Know that no one would agree to write a letter on your behalf if they're not going to do it positively, if they're not going to represent you in a positive light. So if you trust that, and those are the people that you have chosen to write your letters of recommendation, then the recommendation would be then that you would select that first option there that says that you waive your right to review all recommendations and supporting documents. And then a counselor or a teacher would then have no issue with moving forward with sending a letter on your behalf to a college. So then the next box there would just say that you understand that my waiver or no waiver selection above pertains to all colleges to which I apply. And then you would sign your name, date it, save and close. And again, then your FERPA waiver will apply to every college then that you are applying to. And again, your letters of recommendation as well as your transcript then can be forwarded to your colleges with no problem. And if you have any questions, again, about the FERPA and you want that clarity as to which way you should sign it, again, you can talk to your counselor. But again, the general rule is if you want someone to write a letter, they're going to write a letter that is positive on your behalf. So there should be no reason why you wouldn't want to waive your right to seeing that letter.
So we have linked in here on the last slide some resources for support. These are all documents and materials that are provided directly from the Common App. So they have a one-pager of just some usage tips, but all of these linked documents are specific to filling out the application. Some of them are worksheets, so you could sort of write in and start to, think about what you want to include in the application before you get going with writing things in the application. The Common App Dictionary we all thought was kind of cool. Oh, I got to switch my account here. Sorry, it should be working. So all the documents are in a folder here for you guys to access, but the dictionary here is kind of cool because there's oftentimes a lot of questions of what does a FERPA mean, or what does it mean to input a CEEB code, or information like that. So this helps to answer a lot of questions. What's the difference between early action and early decision? So looking through that can kind of help clarify some of the vocabulary that you might not be familiar with. That you would see in an application. So that pretty much covers what we wanted to share with you guys about an application. Ms. Matz, did we get some questions that we need to address?
We did. We got some really good questions. So a couple of questions were about the ACT and SAT scores being sent. If a student has multiple ACT scores, should they send all of them or only their best score?
Good question. Most colleges will say you can send all your scores because they're always going to look at your highest and best score. If you have a score that's an anomaly that's far lower than that cluster of scores that you have, then you wouldn't have to include that. But if you're looking at a 24 on one test and a 26 on another, those are good scores. You can send both of those, especially because on that 24, maybe you got a higher score on your English section than you did on the test where you got a 26. So that would not negatively impact you. All of the schools want to see you in your best light, and so they would not hold a score like that against you. Some schools also do something that's called super scoring. Not all schools do that, but some schools super score, which means they take the individual scores from different tests and then write a new composite score. So that's a possibility as well, which again gives you an advantage to including all of those scores.
The next couple of questions were about the courses. So the first is for the courses and grades section, if none of the schools require it, should students still fill it out and send it anyway?
Definitely not, because it's the exact transcript and it will take you a lot more time to do it. There's nothing in there that they would not see elsewhere, so do not bother with it at all.
And can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry, hold on, let me turn my audio off.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add to that, that the transcript that's going to, accompany your application, as I think Mrs. Klein mentioned as well, will have your entire senior year, courses on it as well. So if they do want to, for example, use that as a part of their, evaluation for admissions to see how rigorous your senior year course schedule is, they will see that on the transcript as well. So again, as Mrs. Klein stated, it would be no need to add that if it is not required. Thank you.
And with that, students were wondering if they should include advisory in any discussion of their courses, either this year's schedule or just in general.
No, you do not need to include advisory.
Okay. I believe everything else was covered. We talked about weighted versus unweighted grades. A question about ideas for what to include in the personal note on Naviance when you're adding a recommender. As somebody who has received many of these, I suggested a reminder of the schools you're applying to, a little thank you, and then some of the bragging information that Ms. Mattis shared earlier. Remember, this is what I did in your class, and this is what I would love for you to focus on, things like that. But any other suggestions for that section?
We would really stress the thank you, because it's important that all of our students understand a teacher writing a recommendation letter for you is not something that they're required to do. That's not part of their class. It's not part of curriculum. It's not part of instruction. They do not have to do that. So they're taking extra time out of their schedule to go ahead and write a letter for you. And that takes time. That's not a simple 1 hour thing. That's something that takes some time. So a thank you is, from our perspective, very important. And I'm sure Ms. Matz would agree that it's nice for you guys to appreciate them and thank them.
Okay. If you request a recommendation be sent to all colleges on your list, can you change that later? So, and I'm not quite sure, we might need to clarify the question a little bit if the question is about on that sheet that students fill out and hand to teachers, or if you add it on Naviance, can you, take the teacher off or take a recommendation off later? On Naviance was the clarification. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So once a teacher has sent the letter from Naviance, the letter is there. You cannot take it back. However, you should be entering on Naviance anyway the colleges that you want that teacher to send the letter to, and those are only the colleges they can send it to. So you can pick and choose which colleges you want the letter to go to. And I think that was something Ms. Mattis was talking about before, especially because you might be applying to a college that will only accept one letter. So if you put two teachers sending it to that college, and I only wanted my math teacher's letter to go, not my science teacher, and you put both of them in, and let's say the science teacher sends it first, you have a problem. your math teacher cannot send it. So you want to be very careful and know once something's gone, it is gone and you cannot get it back. I think that answered the question.
I think too, what the question might be asking is, if a student requests that I send a letter to University of Michigan, and then they decide later not to apply to the University of Michigan, even if I have already sent my letter, will that have an impact?
No, that will not. And to go even further with that, if there is any colleges that they have listed that they end up deciding not to apply to, they're not able to take that college off of their list, but they can notify their counselor, and we have the ability to remove that college off of their list. So it will not hurt them if they actually, even if a recommendation letter went to a school that they're not actually going to apply to, they don't get anything else from them, no application, no other materials, then it will not hurt them. They just won't be evaluated for that school because their file won't be complete.
This is Mrs. Griesbeck. Regarding kids requesting teachers to send letters, this goes back to something that I think Mr. Fogel commented on a lot earlier in today's boot camp, and that is that sometimes we get, for lack of a better expression, locked out of Naviance because kids request multiple teachers to send recommendations. And you have to follow those directions that your counselors give you about requesting your teachers letters of recommendation. I also wonder if the counselors can kind of speak to the idea of requesting multiple letters of recommendation from a bunch of different teachers. I think that happens a lot. And then sometimes there's sort of a big demand for letters of recommendation. And I think kids perhaps need a little bit of guidance on making sure that they don't ask for too many from a single teacher. I know Ms. Mattis commented about going to Mr. Drogosh, but we do get kind of locked out of Naviance if you're requesting more than one letter be sent, because I think most schools don't allow that.
Yeah, I would agree that you need to be thoughtful about who you're asking and why you're asking. No one should be asking for 4 letters of recommendation. If a school is asking for 1 teacher letter, you should be asking for 1 teacher. If you send 2, that's okay, but you really should not be sending more than 1 extra. We're not even advising that you send an extra. But if you chose to and you were like, I am doing this, no more than 1 extra. Because what happens is if a school now sees 3 and 4 and however many letters, they stop reading, right? They're now skimming this and spending less time because they want to get through it. Or perhaps they're not reading that 3rd or 4th letter. And maybe that 3rd letter is the teacher you really wanted to have read. So you are working to your disadvantage if you are overdoing the teacher letters. And you're also putting a lot on our teachers unnecessarily, right? Some of the teachers are asked for 30 kids, or more to write their letters. I know as English teachers, Ms. Matz and Ms. Griesbeck, I feel like if you teach juniors, you guys get really heavily burdened. So if you really wanted your math teacher, and oh, by the way, I think I'm going to ask Ms. Matz too, and you don't need it, you're maybe taking her time from another student who asked Ms. Matz who really did need it. So it is not necessarily better to ask for more letters. And going back to one question, I think you had mentioned a student asked about that form. And if you put a school on that form, your form needs to match Naviance for your teachers. Those need to be the same. You should not have Kalamazoo College on your form and it's not on Naviance and vice versa. Those go together and they need to jive.
However, just it's Fogel. Just real quick, you can say if you're applying to an upper tiered school that requires, maybe you're doing a science major or something that you want your science teacher specifically to write for, but maybe you ask Mrs. Griesbeck to also write, but not to that particular school. So not only does that form need to match Navient, like Ms. Klein just said, it needs to go correctly to the teacher on which schools you want them to write for. So you can kind of, if you do need 2 teachers, sometimes it's a specific letter that a college might ask for.
And one other thing to add about the letters real quick, because we did mention that schools typically want your math, science, English, social studies, or world language. Let's say I'm applying to an art school, or I'm applying to theater and music school. You really should be asking Mrs. Riley or Mrs. Basirico, or maybe I'm applying to engineering and I need to ask Mr. Z, or, you know, you want to make sure you ask MJ because it's physics or something like that. So there are some exceptions when you're thinking about theater, music, that kind of a thing. You do want to have those teachers because they speak to your talents in the area for which you're applying.
And then the final question here as we wrap up is just clarifying how non-teachers or non-Bloomfield Hills High School employees should submit letters of rec. So coaches, mentors from outside of the school.
So the Common App, since we are a Navient school, for our staff does not allow you to enter teachers. However, you will see a section on the recommenders that says other recommenders. Your other recommenders could be that coach. It could be that theater director at the community theater. It could be the employer. So those people could send letters through Common App as other recommenders. However, again, be thinking about what is a college wanting to learn about you from a recommendation, right? They want to learn about you as a student and who you are as a person. So just being thoughtful about what does that letter serve? How does that serve me if I'm going to ask that other individual outside of the school? But that is, you will see other recommenders as the only active recommender option in that section of the Common App. I don't know if someone else wants to kind of add on that topic.
Oh, also, if it is a non-Common App school that you're applying to, that the student is requesting a non-faculty member letter of recommendation, it simply needs to be mailed. So present that non-faculty person with a addressed envelope with a stamp on it, make it easy for them, and then have them just slip their letter into that envelope and mail it off to the admissions office to that university. And you can find all the admissions office physical mailing addresses right in Navient. Any other questions, Ms. Matz, or are we officially wrapped up?
That is it for the questions.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone and thank all the presenters, all my colleagues, both in the counseling office, as well as Ms. Matt, Mrs. Griesbeck. We want to thank Mrs. Chandler and Mr. Whittleballs, who behind the scenes helped us with the technical aspects of this program. And thank you, the students, for logging in here on a summer day and participating. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you all soon, whenever that is. And have a great rest of your summer. Thank you, everyone.
Go Blackhawks.
Go Blackhawks.